Oi, what's happening, everybody? We are live on Uncle Weezy's channel for the first time intentionally, and it is time for another Balls Deep breakdown with me, of course, your host, Uncle Weezy. We have got a great heavyweight main card fight on deck for you guys tonight for the Balls Deep breakdown. Let's bring up the stats. I have got Greg Hardy versus Tuivasa to break down for you guys. And I'm going to get the stats up here on the screen so that you guys can read them along with me. And we'll start like we always do on all my Balls Deep breakdowns with the tail of the tape. Let's go. We got Tuivasa, a very, very, very young heavyweight. You know, usually these guys come into their own around 40. But we got Tuivasa here, 28 years old, and Hardy is 32. We see that there's a big height advantage here for Greg Hardy as he's 6'5". Tuivasa is listed at 6'2", but I'm not quite sure if he's 6'2". There's going to be a pretty big height advantage here for Hardy. And then we also see that there is a 5-inch reach advantage for Greg Hardy. So that is going to be a big deal. That's something we're definitely looking at. This is probably going to be a stand-up battle. So having that 3 inches of height, having that extra 5 inches of reach is going to be really good for Hardy. This is interesting. They have Tuivasa listed as a southpaw. I've watched most of his fights, and he fights almost exclusively out of the orthodox stance. And Greg Hardy, also an orthodox fighter here. We see Greg Hardy's fighting out of ATT, and we got Lion Thai Performance for Tuivasa as he fights mostly out of the UK, but he's also done some training in California as well. So United States and Australia are the countries. So let's get to the pro experience here. We got Tuivasa with 14 fights, Greg Hardy with 11. We got Tuivasa with an 11-3 pro record, Hardy 7-3-1 no contest. Cage time, we got a little more cage time for Tuivasa, but both these guys are fairly inexperienced as professionals, as we got less than 100 minutes of cage time for both of them. But then again, they're both young heavyweights here. 80 minutes for Tuivasa, less than 60 for Hardy, and about an average fight time between 5 and 6 minutes for both of these guys. This is the interesting part here. Obviously, a lot of people know that Greg Hardy was a professional football player before he got involved with mixed martial arts. He was a defensive lineman for the Carolina Panthers, and a good one at that. His mixed martial arts pro career is only 3 years long. So he's not been doing this for long. And in 3 years, he's amassed 11 fights. So he's been very busy since he's started, very active, and that is a good thing. That's something that we look for. Active fighters are always a little bit better to bet on than less active fighters because they're more often in a rhythm. They're more often ready. They're more often not going to have some problems like an adrenaline dump or cage rust. But, Tuivasa doesn't have those problems either. We got 14 professional fights in 8 years for Ty, and he's also been pretty active in the UFC. Not quite as active as Hardy, but we do see that an 8-year, 11-month career. So almost a 9-year career and 14 professional fights for Ty. As far as UFC fights, in Greg Hardy's 3-year career, he's had 11 professional fights. 10 of them have been in the UFC if we include his Contender Series fights. So even though Greg Hardy hasn't been doing this for long, he's been fighting almost entirely 100% of his career at the highest level of mixed martial arts, which is the UFC, in my opinion. So he's got a 6-3-1 no contest record in the UFC, while for Tuivasa it's 5-3. We saw that Hardy's got about 14 more minutes in the UFC cage, and average fight time between 7 and 8 minutes for both of them. So let's see how we got these guys finishing fights. And they are very similar. This is not a fight that's going to be a clash of styles here. This is a fight that's going to be pretty easy to break down, because if we see how these guys finish fights, if we see where these guys spend most of their fights in the UFC, we're going to see that this is probably going to be, a stand-up battle here. And we can see it in the stats. Is Tuivasa, of his 11 wins, he's finished 91% of them by knockout. So 10 of his 11 career wins have come by knockout. While for Greg Hardy, of his 11 wins, 86% of them have come by knockout. So 9 of his 11 fights, or I'm sorry, 6 of his 7 wins have finished by knockout. And in the UFC, it's 5 of his 6 wins that have finished inside the distance. As far as how they're losing fights, we see that Tuivasa in his 3 professional losses has lost once by knockout, once by submission, and once by decision. And we see that for Greg Hardy, it's once by knockout, and he's got 3 losses, so 2 came by decision. He's never been submitted. What's up, Mystic Sosa in the chat? My guy from the DFS by the Numbers Discord, always one of the best people to talk to in there. Thanks for hanging out with me, man. I appreciate it. I just decided to go live 5 minutes ago. I don't do this often, but I kind of want to get used to live streaming. So the fact that somebody's in here in the chat hanging out with me, breaking down this fight, I do appreciate it. Let's go, Sosa. But let's get this back to the numbers here. We got some striking stats to break down, and that's going to be really important for this fight. Because as I mentioned, neither one of these guys is spending a whole lot of time in control time positions. Oh, man, my guy Wayne here, too, in the chat. What's up, Wayne? Good to see you. Thanks for hanging out with us. I see this guy in the DFS by the Numbers Discord, the only place that I announced this live stream, by the way. So thanks for hanging out with me, Wayne. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming out here. Let's talk some striking stats with these guys. Very, very, very similar striking stats. We've got Tuivasa landing 4.38 per minute out of 8.61 for a 51% striking accuracy, while we've got Greg Hardy landing 4.83 out of 9.58 thrown for a 50.43% striking accuracy. Both of these guys have got a good amount of power, as Greg Hardy is landing a knockdown on almost 1% of his significant strikes landed, 0.86%. He is averaging 0.62 knockdowns per 15 minutes, while for Tuivasa, it's almost double that. He is landing a knockdown on 1.56% of his significant strikes landed. That is averaging out to 1.03 knockdowns in a 15-minute period. So this is definitely a fight that's going to take place on the feet, and both of these guys have got some pretty good power in their hands, and neither one of them goes to the grappling much. So I think if we're going to find out who wins this fight, we're going to have to find out who's going to be more effective standing and banging in the center of the cage, and that will tell the tale of who's going to cover this bet, of which ticket is going to cash. And then we've got on the defensive side a little bit better numbers for Hardy, I would say, as we've got Tuivasa is absorbing 3.44 significant strikes per minute out of 7.02 for a 51% striking defense, while Greg Hardy is getting hit 3.12 times per minute out of 7.13 attempted for a 56% striking accuracy. So about 5% better striking accuracy for Hardy than Tuivasa. We see that Tuivasa, while landing 4.38 significant strikes a minute, is only absorbing 3.44, so almost a 1 significant strike difference and a good ratio there. While for Greg Hardy, he's landing 4.83 and only absorbing 3.12. So that is a 1.7 significant strike difference ratio. So the ratio and the significant strike difference and the striking defense, all a little bit better for Greg Hardy here. As far as chinniness, Greg Hardy has never been knocked down in the UFC in 10 fights, while Tuivasa, in the 200 significant strikes that have been landed against him, he has been knocked down twice. That comes out to exactly 1% and 0.51 knockdowns allowed per 15 minutes. So that's not what I would call chinny for the heavyweight division. I know that he was knocked down by Blagoy Ivanov in their fight, and also by Junior Dos Santos knocked him down and then finished him with ground and pound. Let's look at the grappling stats here so that we can get an idea of why I'm saying that this fight is going to take place almost entirely on the feet. So Tuivasa has 8 UFC fights, and he has only attempted 2 takedowns, and he has gotten none of them. So he has a 0% takedown percentage. He has gotten 0 takedowns for 15 minutes, and he has gotten 0 submission attempts for 15 minutes. So we see a guy in Tuivasa who is completely uninterested in engaging in the grappling realm. While for Greg Hardy, it's very similar numbers, only 3 takedown attempts in 10 fights. He has only completed 1 of them, and that is a takedown percentage of 33%. He's got 0.21 takedowns per 15 minutes, 0 submission attempts for 15 minutes, and a 7.48% control time. While for Tuivasa, he's got a 15.72% control time. Now, if we look at their takedown defense and their defensive grappling numbers, we see that Tuivasa does not have great takedown defense at only 46.67%. He's been taken down 8 out of the 15 times his opponents have shot on him. He is getting taken down an average of 2.05 times per 15 minutes. He's averaging a quarter submission attempt against per 15 minutes and 15% control time. While Greg Hardy is showing much better takedown defense, probably because he trains at AT&T and sees a lot of that in the gym. And he has got 80% takedown defense. He's successfully defended 8 of 10 takedowns against. He gets takedowns 0.41 times per 15 minutes and only 0.21 submission attempts against per 15 minutes, and he's only been controlled 5.27% of the time. So if we add up the control time numbers for and against for Hardy and Tuivasa, it tells us a tale. Hardy's control time stats come up to about 13%, meaning 87% of his fights take place in the center of the cage in a striking battle. For Tuivasa, it's about 69% of his fights that are taking place in the center of the cage in a striking battle. However, if we look at how few takedown attempts we've seen out of both of these guys here, Tuivasa with 2 in 8 fights, Hardy with only 3 in 10 fights, it's pretty safe to say that this is going to be a striking battle taking place in the middle of the cage, and the more effective striker is going to get the job done here. So let's have a look and see what I missed in the chat while I was yapping here. And we got Wayne Ria back in here. He is saying Arlovsky Felipe is scheduled for October 16th. My God. I guess they're trying to get Arlovsky to be in one more exciting fight before he retires. And Carlos Felipe is a guy who usually brings a pretty exciting fight. That'll be an interesting one. It is a weird fight. It's not one that I think the people were really screaming for. And Noah Allen definitely is echoing my sentiments there. What's up, Noah? And we got Arlovsky by decision is the pick here for Sosa. Felipe isn't ready for that, and Felipe's been in a lot of close fights. He hasn't won anything decisively yet. So, I don't know if he's ready for the veteran Andrei Arlovsky, especially with such a one-dimensional mixed martial arts attack. And then we got my guy Aldo Estrada in the house. What's up, Aldo? Thanks for hanging out with me here while I go live to talk about one fight and one fight only, this heavyweight banger on the 264 card. Let's get back into the stats here because we went over the pro experience. We went over the finish stats. We went over the striking stats. We went over the grappling stats. We got to now go over the last thing that we got to talk about is going to be the strength of schedule for these guys. Who have they fought in the UFC? Who have they beaten? Who have they lost to? So let's go. My UFC strength of schedule metric that I keep, I basically add up the records of everybody that they've fought in the UFC. I take out the fights that took place against the fighter that we're talking. So Tuivasa's fights are all taken out of those records, and then I compute a ratio of wins to losses to determine, a better ratio means that they're fighting better competition with more wins than losses. If you see a ratio less than 1, it means that they're fighting with somebody with more losses than wins on the aggregate. And it kind of tells you how tough a competition they're fighting. So right here, my strength of schedule metric shows a 1.34 ratio for Tuivasa and a 1.1 ratio for Hardy. And what we do see also is that the average record of the guy that Tai Tuivasa is fighting is 6.88 and 5.13. So that's 12 total fights. So the guys that Hardy's fighting have only 4.4 total fights, 2.3 wins, 2.1 losses. What that tells us is that Tai Tuivasa not only is fighting the competition with better win-loss records, but he's also fighting the guys that have more UFC fights, more experienced competition. They're more likely to be tough fights because they got to the point where they got 8 or 9 UFC fights under their belt. You don't get to 8 or 9 UFC fights by losing 8 fights. You have to win some in order to stick around for that long. So when you see a higher total fight number, that is definitely something that's just as important as the ratio itself. If we look at who these guys are beating, we see a A big difference here. A 1.29 ratio in Tai Tuivasa's losses to a less than 1.89 ratio for Greg Hardy. So the average record of the guy that Hardy is beating in the UFC has a record of 1.33 wins and 1.5 losses, while the guys that Tai Tuivasa are beating 7.2 wins, 5.6 losses. So much more experienced competition and a competition with a better win-loss ratio. And who are they losing to? We see that they're both losing to credentialed, solid competition. It's the average record of the guy that beats Tuivasa is 6 1/3 and 4 1/3 for 10.67 total fights and a 1.46 ratio, while for Hardy it's 5 3 1/3, 8.33 total fights and a 1.5 ratio. So I would say that Tai Tuivasa has better overall competition. He has better wins. In terms of who they lose to, it's very similar. If we look at the last 5, we see that Tai Tuivasa had a 3-fight losing streak against Junior Dos Santos where he got knocked out. He was knocked out on the feet first. Dos Santos followed him to the ground and finished with ground and pound. Blagoy Ivanov, he lost via unanimous decision, but that was a very close fight. That one could have went either way. And Sergey Spivak submitted him in the second round after taking him down 6 or 7 times in the first about round and a half. So Tai Tuivasa, in his 3 losses before beating Stefan Struve and before beating Harry Hunsucker, was finished 2 out of the 3 times on the ground. But standing up, he can hang with anybody in the UFC, it seems like, except for maybe like those top 2 or 3 guys, of which his opponent, Greg Hardy, is not at this point in his career. I'm definitely thinking that this is a step down in competition comparison to Spivak, Ivanov, and the version of Junior Dos Santos that Tai Tuivasa saw about 3 years ago. While for Greg Hardy, he's also got really impressive losses on his record, probably even more impressive with Marcin Tybura and Alexander Volkov. I think are both a little bit higher level than Sergey Spivak. As a matter of fact, Marcin Tybura has a win over Sergey Spivak, Blagoy Ivanov, and Junior Dos Santos. So Dos Santos, Ivanov, and Spivak for Tai Tuivasa are not only his only UFC losses, they're his only career losses. This is the level of competition that he is losing to. While for the level of competition that Greg Hardy's losing to, we're talking guys like Marcin Tybura, Alexander Volkov, and his wins are not impressive either. I mean, like the Stefan Struve win, not very impressive, even though the guy is a veteran. I think that was his last UFC fight. Harry Hunsucker was a short notice opponent, less than a week's notice he took that fight on. So that's not impressive wins. But if we look at Hardy's most recent wins, we see Maurice Green, not impressive, Jorgen De Castro, and I just want everybody to know, I work hard doing this. It takes a lot of work and data entry to get all these stats on the screen. But in terms of all the videos that I've been doing lately and all the content that I've been putting out there, there hasn't been any harder work than there was today, having to watch these horse shit fights against fucking Jorgen De Castro and the combat wombat Ben Sosoli. So for any of you pricks out there who says that your Uncle Weezy doesn't fucking care about you and doesn't work hard for you, I want you to know that I'm watching these fucking fights. I watched that 15-minute fucking shit show with Ben Sosoli. I watched that fucking fight against Jorgen De Castro, that piece of shit. So I'm working hard over here, and I do it all for free, and it's because your Uncle Weezy loves you. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. Now let's move on. We got to look a little more in depth into the strength of schedule here, because all these numbers are real close. I'm seeing some small advantages for Hardy in terms of being better defensively, having a little better ratio and significant strike difference. He's got those measurables in terms of being 3 or 4 inches taller than Tuivasa, and he also has a 5-inch reach advantage. I like all that with Hardy. I'm seeing for Tuivasa, I'm seeing a weakness on the ground that Hardy is not going to exploit. Tai Tuivasa is probably, even though the numbers aren't quite as impressive, he has struck with and hung with better competition on the feet, in my opinion, than Greg Hardy has. And one of the things that I think is going to be very important in this fight is the leg kicks. Tai Tuivasa absolutely throws devastating leg kicks. It looked like Hunsucker wanted to quit after the third one. He was destroying Blagoy Ivanov with some of those leg kicks. And Ivanov was a lefty, so a lot of that fight, it was orthodox against lefty. I did see Tuivasa go southpaw for some of that fight against Ivanov so that he could throw those leg kicks and start to jab more. But I don't know which stance we're going to see Tuivasa start in here. But as long as Hardy starts orthodox, I would like to see Tai Tuivasa start orthodox, because I think the leg kicks are going to be a really big weapon for him here. Because if you want to watch some tape on Tuivasa recently, those leg kicks that he's throwing are incredible. So I think that on the feet, Tuivasa might have just a little bit of a power advantage and a little bit of a technique advantage. Although Hardy is more athletic, he's going to have the reach advantage. And some of those striking numbers, I think just they match up a little bit better for Hardy here. But let's go into the advanced stats. These advanced stats are available on DFS by the Numbers Patreon. You can go there to his Patreon and get all this stuff for only $10 a month. But the this matchup template that you see here, I will make the link available for free in the description of this video. Please download it for free. Use it when you're thinking about betting on any fights. You can go through all the stats of that fight. It'll help you make better gambling decisions. But if we look at Tuivasa before those last 5 fights, let's look at his wins. They're over Rashad Coulter, 1-3. Cyril Asker, 2-3. Andrei Arlovsky, he got a win by decision, 20-14. And then the wins are Struve and Hunsucker. And his losses are Dos Santos, Ivanov, and Spivak. 2 of those 3 losses, he was finished on the ground. Greg Hardy, he's got wins over Austin Lane, Tabaris Gordon, Dmitry Smolyakov, Juan Adams, Yorgan De Castro, and Maurice Green. So none of those are impressive wins. He also got a win over Ben Sassoli, which was turned to a no contest because he used an inhaler. And then we've got the losses to Tibura, Volkov, and Crowder, another DQ there. So, the level of competition, neither one of these guys, I mean, I guess Andrei Arlovsky is the best win, and Stefan Struve maybe. Those are probably the 2 best wins, because we got 5 wins for Tuivasa. We've got 6 wins for Hardy, and I can really only find 2 that are decent. This is going to be a stand-up battle. These guys are going to bang it out in the middle of the cage. I don't see either of these guys going to their offensive wrestling. I'm seeing some of these numbers kind of line up for Hardy, but I think the leg kicks are going to be a big difference. I think they're actually going to make the difference in this fight. I think Tai Tuivasa, having fought tougher competition for a longer period of time, having just been in this game longer, is going to probably win this fight. I think what's going to be a big deal here is conditioning. And I want to bring up a couple of these wins by decision if we look at the Austin Lane win for this is Greg Hardy, KO. Tabaris Gordon, KO, first round. Smolyakov, KO, first round. Juan Adams, KO, first round. And then we see the Sosoli fight. He was not able to finish Ben Sosoli, and frankly, he never really even had him hurt. So Sosoli, we see that one go to decision, and that was a very, very, very low volume fight. Sosoli had nothing for Hardy. The next one that went to decision was Yorgan De Castro. And what's interesting about this fight is De Castro actually fought for 7.5 minutes here. But after 7.5 minutes, he threw a leg kick that Hardy checked, and then De Castro quit. I think he threw and landed maybe 3 strikes in the last 7.5 minutes of the fight. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up here was Greg Hardy's conditioning. Greg Hardy's really only knocking out the bottom of the barrel bums that the UFC has brought in for fights. Austin Lane, Tabaris Gordon, Dmitry Smolyakov, Juan Adams. Those are the guys that he knocked out. And then he knocked out Maurice Green too. He has never beaten anybody of Tuivasa's quality. And Tuivasa isn't going to go away the first time that Hardy hits him. Hardy doesn't even hit people that much. But what I have noticed is that Hardy's conditioning, if you push any kind of a pace, only lasts for about 8 minutes. So I just don't see this fight, once it goes past the 6 or 7 minute point. I don't see Greg Hardy doing much. I don't see him getting much done after about 7 minutes in this fight. But I think I will see Tuivasa have the conditioning advantage here and be able to push a better pace for longer. So I'm going to go with Tai Tuivasa. I think this fight finishes inside the distance. I could see a Tai Tuivasa third round knockout. That's what I am going to go with on this fight. What are you guys thinking? If you got any things that you want to ask about the stats here in the chat, let me know. Thanks, Headley One, for stopping by here, man. He's saying that he's got a half unit on Hardy by decision. Hardy is the favorite here, and I see why he's a favorite, but I'm still waiting for one of these guys to have, a really, kind of like a standout performance against somebody that's really good. And I think this is both of their first chance, because both of these guys are young in the heavyweight division. So this is a chance for one of these guys to take the next step. Hardy or Tuivasa has the skill set to get it done here. I just personally think Tuivasa's got a little more skill on the feet, a little more experience, and a little more diversity with his striking game. And that asthma and that need for the inhaler of Greg Hardy, the fact that he cuts weight to make 265 and barely makes it sometimes, I'm really worried about his conditioning. So I don't think that this is a clear-cut fight, but I am going to pick Tuivasa. Let's see what you guys are saying here. XBL on Twitch in the house. We live. Yes, we are. I don't do it often, but I wanted to get more used to live streaming here. He says, I already love what I'm hearing. Inside the distance, one of my biggest plays on this card for the fight. Yeah, and what the great thing about the inside the distance bet here is that it covers both sides. Both of these guys are great strikers. I don't see one of these guys having a massive advantage anywhere except for in the athleticism and the measurables for Hardy. I mean, clearly he's more athletic. Clearly he's bigger. Clearly he's longer. Clearly he's the more naturally gifted athlete. But if we're just talking about fighting, these guys both hit hard. They're both not going to go to the wrestling, which means that I think that there's going to be some attrition piled up in this fight. And as we get late and these guys start to get really tired, when one of those big shots lands on the chin, I think you're going to see one of these cats go down. And I think that inside the distance bet for either of these guys is a good way to play it. And also the fight doesn't go to decision. It could be a really good parlay piece. Let's take a look, by the way, I'll get the betting odds up here on the screen. I'm showing Greg Hardy here as a minus 142 favorite on FanDuel. Tai Tuivasa minus 142. Greg Hardy's plus money here at plus 112. Method of victory, they got Tuivasa by KO at plus 155. Hardy by KO plus 310. Hardy by decision plus 360. Tuivasa by decision plus 440. So when you see Hardy by KO plus 310 and Hardy by points plus 360, obviously the bookies think that this finishes inside the distance. And the difference between Tuivasa by KO and Tuivasa by points plus 155 and plus 140. So definitely the bookies are seeing a little more of a chance for Tai Tuivasa to get this one done inside the distance. Will this fight go the distance? According to FanDuel right now, they're saying that it is a minus 220 bet that this fight will not go to decision. So that could be a potential parlay piece for some of you guys that are looking to play this fight that way. And XBL is also saying that he's also on Tuivasa. I am as well here, but I think either one of these guys can win the fight. And I think if I do play it, I might just bet that fight doesn't go to decision. That way I cover both sides. But I am leaning Tuivasa here. We got Headley One who's saying, I think Hardy has asthma. Inhaler ingredients may be prohibited by USADA. Well, he uses a USADA-approved inhaler. If you go back and you watch that fight against the Combat Wombat Ben Sosoli, and let me just tell you, I watched it, so you guys don't fucking have to. Don't watch that fight because it fucking sucked. Your Uncle Weezy sat through it. I'm telling you because I love you and I care about you. Don't sit through it. But they were talking about how his inhaler is USADA approved, and that's why that official who was in his corner actually let him use it during that fight because it is a USADA approved inhaler. But still, nonetheless, it was illegal. He shouldn't have done that. And Wayne Rhea, my guy, he knows that the inhaler is prohibited. And he thinks Tuivasa wins inside the distance. And I think that that's a really good bet as well. I'm not completely counting out Hardy, but I am leaning Tuivasa here. And since Hardy's conditioning does worry me, I could see Tuivasa getting it done in the second or the third round. Headley won, telling us that Hardy gasses out against grapplers, but this fight should be standing. That is a good point. When he really gassed out against Tabura, it was when he wound up under him. But prior to that, he was still throwing with pretty fast hands before Tabura took him down in the second round. But even then, even though his hands still did look good and he was still moving pretty well, like I said, I taped all these fights today, so it's all still really fresh in my mind. Hardy's mouth was wide open. He was very tired there. So even though the longer this fight stays standing, the longer Hardy will be able to stick to his game plan and not get too gassed, I still see him being the one gassing before Tuivasa, but I might be wrong on that. And then Wayne Rhea saying, I want to see if Hardy will wrestle. Trains at ATT, and I could see him controlling Ty on the ground if he doesn't gas. Yeah, we haven't seen offensive wrestling out of either of these guys, but when you watch the tape, you do see that when these guys do get finished, when these guys are at their weakest, it's when their backs are against the mat, whether it's Tuivasa or Hardy. So yeah, you might see one of these guys say, you know what, maybe I will go to the wrestling. But because they don't do it usually, because it's not a usual part of their game plan, if they go to the wrestling and they're unsuccessful with it, you're going to see their gas tank empty out so much quicker. And I don't know if that's what Hardy wants to do because he's already a little bit suspect with the conditioning. He's already having trouble making that 266-pound limit on weigh-in day. So if he wants to wrestle and he doesn't, he's only got a 3-year mixed martial arts career, you guys. Wrestling is a skill that takes a long time to build up, especially at the level that these guys are wrestling at in the UFC. So it would be interesting to see either of these guys throw that wrestling wrinkle into their game here, although I don't think that we'll see it. I think if somebody's able to do it successfully, they can easily win a round, and it could really help them fill up their opponent's arms with blood, take the sting out of some of those strikes, which is something that I think Tuivasa is going to do with those leg kicks. Wayne Rhea is saying that you would expect the former NFL player to have better conditioning, but he has asthma. So, that's a part of it. And, it's a different kind of conditioning that whatever sport it is that you're involved in, you build up conditioning for that sport. But MMA is different, man. Anybody who's ever grappled knows that it's just a completely different kind of conditioning that it takes to do any kind of martial arts, whether it's striking or grappling. It is something you need to be in absolute tip-top shape in order to be able to pull off. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I appreciate you showing up for the live stream, man. We had as many as over 10 people in here at once. So you can check me out every Sunday night before a UFC card on Saturday. My man DFS by the numbers and I go balls deep into the stats every Sunday night, 6:15 Central Time on Pub Sports Radio. The show is called Stat Diggers. We did one for UFC 264. You can go check that out. If you want to see balls deep breakdowns of the main event and co-main event for UFC 264, you can go to DFS by the numbers YouTube channel. Him and I chopped up those events, went about 45 minutes into both of those fights. So if you're looking for a all points breakdown on those two fights, you can check them out on DFS by the numbers channel, or right here on Uncle Weezy's channel. I have balls deep breakdowns on all 4 of the undercard fights. I've now done Tuivasa and Hardy. I plan to do Kunitskaya and Aldana next. I'm not going to do O'Malley and Matinho. Well, you know what? I will. I'll do that one right now. The O'Malley Matinho, here's your balls deep breakdown. That's going to be an ass shaving. And that's it. Sean O'Malley's going to shave Matinho's ass. You heard it here first. And then I may even do one more on the undercard, but I think I'm done with the Balls Deep breakdowns for this week for UFC 264. So the next opportunity you're going to have after the Balls Deep breakdown of Aldana Kunitskaya on Uncle Weezy's channel to check me out is Stat Diggers, Sunday night, 6:15 Central Time on Pub Sports Radio. Come check me out there with my guy Brady. This one, I am signing off. Thank you all for checking in for a Balls Deep breakdown for your Uncle Weezy, and I will see you on the next episode. God bless.